a nice summary of those. I would say the majority of them were non-substantive. A lot of them were technical, like fixing errors and stuff, but there were a couple substantive around incentives and stuff like that that we'll capture for council in a document to look at in as part of the written update that will go out tomorrow. So just know that is coming.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the land use package
You
so
know,
far?
and maybe, sorry, Ruth, if I may, I just let me add also just for context for the whole group. And thank you to Anna Bertanzetti. I think she's on the call. Yeah, I see her name. Her ability to talk about the technical side of that bill has changed a lot of conversations down at the Capitol. It's been pretty neat to be down there and watch that happen. So thank you to Anna. And I do want to say last Thursday was a very productive day. I think Broomfield was sought out by not only the governor's team, but members of the committee. We were able to talk about some questions that we then saw translate into questions being asked by the committee members of the panelists, which was helpful. So it was a good day. So I just want to let you know we're continuing those conversations. I know, Jean, you had forwarded an email. CC4CA is becoming more active in that space. With Anita Seitz, I think, leading that, and she's been in coordination. We look at participating in those calls. I think they're looking at Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So Anna and I have responded there. So just want to let you know there's a lot going on outside of the formal pieces that we're seeing in the committee hearings or actually in the committee of the whole. So those will continue. We'll try to continue to share that information out with council as we proceed. But it was neat. We sat up there with, CCI, Eric Bergman was there, CCAT was there. It was kind of neat. It's neat to see a bill that are bringing all these membership organizations at least to the table. We may all disagree a little bit on approach or philosophy, but those conversations are and will continue to happen as we kind of move through the path with that bill.
Great. Any other comments or questions on those? All right. And I may also add, I guess, that the same local government groups that Danae just described are also meeting with several senators and, just sharing input and perspective. And so in addition to the work with the House, there's already advanced conversations happening with the senators. All right. So then I think I'll shift to housing. And the biggest movement in this space, and of course some of the land use and the housing, right, they're related, but more directly, I guess, on point to the housing is Senate Bill 106, which is construction defect reform. Broomfield is in an amend position on this, and amend to support, was the intention at the council meeting, but we registered as amend, and essentially the concern here was that the bill not impact our ability to proceed as a claimant if we had a construction defect concern. And so the sponsors actually, heard that concern, not just from us, but other local governments, and had an amendment drafted that does exempt local governments, including counties, city and counties, counties proper, etc. So that will be likely adopted tomorrow. The bill had about a 6-hour hearing. You can imagine this is an issue that remains contentious at the State House. So it had about a 6-hour committee hearing last week, and then it is up tomorrow for action only, which means they won't take testimony again, but just vote on the amendments and the bill. So we actually are hopeful to get those exact amendments this morning from the lobbyists for the developers, the home developers, and can share those along, and you can all look directly to see if they meet the needs. And so that's where that one is. I will just stop again, see if there's questions on the construction defect bill, the one that we've taken a position on.
Yeah, Ruth, just wanted to add, so in addition to the local government piece, there was also conversation about if the remedy isn't sufficient, that the claimant can still go to court with that. And where is that kind of language and ability for those claimants?
Yes, great question, Mayor Pro Tem. And there is an amendment that clarifies that. Again, the sponsors would argue that that right was always maintained, but they did add language that clarifies basically it says you can still pursue legal action, even if you've been offered a right to remedy. And so again, we can share that language and make sure that it's sufficient, and meets the needs that the council had identified a couple weeks ago.
Great, thank you.
Danae, I don't know if you were going to add anything there.
Sorry, I think I hit unmute on accident, but I will add since I am unmuted. I think just for greater context again, so council, just as a reminder, it was 106, Senate Bill 106 that council decided to support out of the package of construction defect bills that were before you on the 27th, which Ruth just gave that update to. One of the other ones, the real property one, was up today this morning. I don't know what time it is at home, 12:45. So I don't know, Ruth, if you know what happened with that bill this morning, if it made any progress, but it might be good to give kind of context because they are, right, all trying to address the same problem in a different way. And that one was scheduled for this morning.
Yeah. So I believe that's 12. Let me look at that again. And
it's
this one
12:30.
12:30.
Yeah, 12:30.
Thank you. And so again, the council didn't take a position on this, but Danae's absolutely right. It's part of the larger political context. Just a quick reminder, this one amended the consumer protection statutes and extended the statute of limitation. It made it void as public policy for you to put in any kind of contract that somebody could not pursue a construction defect. And it did a couple other things. So it was up on third reading, I believe, this morning, and
it's up on second reading, Ruth, and it's not been heard yet. They're still finishing up the concealed permit carry. They're not done with third yet.
Yes, so it may be a little while before we get to that, but we can report back on the outcome.
Thank you. No big deal. I just want to make sure we kind of keep in context, right? Like, even though council has taken the position on 106, we are continuing to monitor the other bills because they do impact. So there was that one, and then there's the study bill as well. And one thing I would also share, while at the Capitol last Thursday, we were able to meet with Senator Winter as well on the construction defects bill. So for context, Boulder last Thursday went into an opposed position on Senate Bill 106, which was interesting to be down there with their staff at that time and kind of have those conversations. Anna and I met with Senator Winter to discuss kind of what her concerns were and to try to get a better gauge at which bill she was leaning towards and if there's some work that we can do. So Nancy and Jeff and Anna have all been very helpful. We were able to dive into some of her questions and we'll follow up. So we'll continue to keep you updated, but there is a lot of that play right now. And then I think the last one that I would just mention on the construction defects was, let's see, what is that number? I think, so House Bill 1083 was the study. And then the other one that I would mention is Senate Bill 112, which was the construction defect action procedures. And that's the one from Lundeen. It's on the Republican sponsored bill, and it's up in committee at the end of this week. So nothing's happened there either. So again, trying to get the timing to work on all of these and monitor. So bigger picture there, just if helpful for context. And I see Heidi, you have your hand up.
Thank you, guys. There's a lot of information. I was reading something and listening at the same time. So I don't know if we mentioned when you were describing 106, I read your email about the 2/3 vote, to bring something forward from an HOA. Are they still considering 2/3? Because I feel like that's the way that he explained it on that email was, that it really does reflect what they do anyway in HOAs if they want to move forward with something on their property. Was there any change in the 2/3?
Janae, I'm sorry, did you want to answer that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So we haven't seen the amendments yet. Again, hoping to get those yet this morning. But that part of the bill was one that was pretty heavily criticized because the feeling was it's hard to reach even a simple majority in some of these cases. And so, you should just be aware that it's one of the points of contention. And we were told by the lobbyists for the developers that, they've heard that doesn't make them happy. They, I think, are share your position, Council Member Henkel, but they are thinking they may need to negotiate somewhere between a simple majority and 2/3, 60%. You know, they've been sort of kicking around a number that's a threshold that's a little more challenging, but maybe not the 2/3. So we may see that in an amendment today. We may not, you know, if they don't feel, I would have to think if they don't feel it's needed to get the bill out of committee, they probably would not offer it because, you know, in their view, I think that's weakening the bill. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My internet's a little spotty, so I heard most of that. It sounds like it's still contentious. It sounds like they might lower it from a 2/3. So thank you.
Okay, that is kind of the big picture on construction defect reform. Then moving into transportation, this is an exciting week. I think we're going to see a bill introduced coming from Senator Fenberg and the Speaker of the House, Julie McCluskey, President Fenberg, I should say, that will set up, it's the rail bill both for the Front Range passenger rail and for the mountain rail. And this measure essentially levies a road user fee that will then raise about $50 million a year to be used for both of these corridors. The priority for the Front Range Rail is the northwestern portion. And then there is the other parts of the bill really are planning, essentially making sure that there is solid planning around how these two connect and you know, how they will work in tandem going forward. The Northwest MCC, which of course Broomfield's a member of, will be meeting with President Fenberg. Well, we will be meeting at least with staff. We'll be meeting with Lisa Kaufman and what's the other gentleman's name? I'm sorry, it's eluding me at the moment, but having a staff briefing this afternoon. And the staff of Northwest MCC, including Sarah Grant, who I see is on the call, have received the background materials and had a really good discussion last week. You know, Sarah, I might hand it over to you to give your input, but essentially very excited about this, of course, but there's some concerns and just the devil's in the detail that we don't want to, you know, divert any revenue from other important priorities. So Sarah, if I can maybe ask you if you want to speak just to this.
Thank you, Ruth. Sarah Grant, transportation staff. Thanks for the opportunity. And I just want to clarify that also the mayor did receive this draft bill just a couple hours ago. So we're still going through it. And like Ruth said, we will be meeting in a couple of hours with the staff of Fenberg's office. And we will, you know, just at a first blush, it's clarifying language around the transportation enterprise, now it's known as CTIO, formerly known as HPTE, around some fee revenues, around raising the fee on rental vehicles to $3, adding $3 per day on short-term rentals of a motor vehicle, and $2 a day for rental battery electric vehicles. Also clarifies diversifying multimodal transportation options, including rail projects, so they can use those funds for multimodal projects, clarifying that transportation includes multimodal, and those funds could be used within the travel shed of that corridor in which those funds are collected. So that's kind of it at a high level. Some of the concerns that I see with this is that this indicates that the potentially revenues from the managed lanes, particularly I-25, could be potentially diverted to potentially to rail projects. This could be concerning for the interest of Broomfield, considering the I-25 managed lanes are not complete. There's the gap between Northwest Parkway all the way up to our Broomfield border, and then again another gap all the way segment 4 through Larimer and to Larimer County. So that is really concerning because those are not funded yet. And those segments actually have a very high potential to create revenue. So if funds are diverted before those are completed, we lose out on the opportunity, A, to get that completed and use those revenues for multimodal. So I just wanted to call that out, and we'll find out a little bit more around what this travel shed means if the corridor for Northwest Rail is the ultimate alignment, could I-25 revenues be diverted to Northwest Rail? So that's it at a high level. I'm happy to share this draft, and probably there will be the actual bill that will get dropped later this week, as Ruth said.
And I know that, Sarah always asks these great questions when we're in these meetings. And so we'll try to get some response back around this concern of, diverting or moving in front of these other projects that she described. I will share that I know the I-70 Coalition had similar concerns and we're in a meeting with Speaker McCluskey, I think last week, and she said, we are not intending to divert from anything, anywhere. She sort of gave them that mantra. That's of course her community, and they would be, I think, equally concerned as we are about any movement in that way. But good to put it out there today and get some questions answered and get back to you on it all.
The only other thing I would add on that is we did have conversations about this bill last Thursday with our representatives. And I think there's a lot of questions from them of how we're able to come up with this 66 billion transportation, right, investment when there's all these other transportation bills and we keep talking about how there's no money. So there is a little bit of a hypocrisy or something in that. So we did ask some questions to try to get a little bit more teased out of that. Last week, they were just calling it a leverage, but they weren't clear on what that leverage was going to be to come up with that match. So we'll see where that lands, but we are asking those questions too. So did want to let you know, we are aware that it's very interesting. This is a huge dollar item around transportation, and there's all these other bills where that we've been told over and over again how there are no transportation dollars anywhere, right? The limitations of an enterprise fund. So kind of putting that into the bigger context and asking how this one kind of is different. Obviously, it has some big legs with Fenberg and McCluskey as the primary sponsors.
Yeah. And of course, the administration is fully behind this and has been for some time as well. And just on that note, Danae, Broomfield doesn't have a position on this bill, but the Vulnerable Road Users Enterprise Bill 36, Senate Bill 36, which we have spent time talking about, that measure, basically the governor's office said we can't support another enterprise for this particular purpose. And so has told the sponsors they need to go back to the drawing board and rethink this. And, there's clearly some tension there. And this bill sets up an enterprise for rail, and that is their priority versus the one for vulnerable road users. That one, they're going to, there's some talk about looking at other revenue and trying to kind of piecemeal some things. But yes, to Danae's point, this tension between the various ideas out there and how they are put forward to leverage for what purpose. Interesting discussions for sure. Hey, any other comment or questions on the rail bill?
So this isn't on the rail bill, but it's on 36. So we've put out the message that allowing counties and municipalities to do that vulnerable user fee by themselves, right? So cut out the state with that and have the state allow local communities to assess that registration fee for the purpose of vulnerable road users. Is that a way forward for the sponsors, or is that something they're still objectionable to?
I think maybe given the initial path forward for them has changed a bit, it's something to revisit. I think that they remain concerned that there not being more of a systematic approach to it, and that all communities can come together and benefit from potentially putting a fee on all the groups, all the counties that are part of that, and then dispersing it out, again, proportionately, but dispersing it out. I think it's worth the conversation asking them again, because right now the conversation is to take existing revenue, like for example, from Faster, and put it into this pot of money just for vulnerable road users. So it's not netting any new money, but it's perhaps reprioritizing the funding that we have. So to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, I think, they plan to get the the coalition back together again this week, and that's something that we can see if there's more traction on. Okay, any other questions about the kind of pending transportation measures? Okay, then there's just two other bills that fall into different categories for us. One is Senate Bill 22, which was county authority for tobacco flavor ban. This again was not so much impacting Broomfield because we are a city and county, but would have allowed statutory counties to do a tobacco flavor ban within their jurisdiction. This made it all the way through the Senate and actually was heard last week in the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee. Really interesting vote. It failed, and that was because a number of Democrats joined with a couple of Republicans, and it was again a very mixed vote. Of course, tobacco retailers opposed this and really fear that banning flavors is going to impact their revenue stream and undermine their business model. And then the governor's office has been pretty consistent that they oppose flavor bans, both at the state level, at the local level. They're just not interested in flavor bans. So the governor's office was pretty active in opposing this bill. Our representative, Rep. Lindstedt, did also vote against that. And so that one's done for this year. Julia, I don't know if there's any other, I know you listened in on part of it too. If there's any other commentary you'd want to add?
No, other than I will say there's been some kind of, there was some frustration after the fact since Representative Lindstedt didn't describe his no vote. And then there was some speculation around, I guess there's some sort of pending potential cigar festival in your neck of the woods. So just political context for you all to know that that has come up in a couple different venues and some frustration with Representative Lindstedt. So people will move on. I think the coalition will probably come back years from now with a different governor. I think this is kind of their third try, if you will, with this authority. And I think they're going to just maybe wait until there's a different person on the first floor. So that's about it.
I think for just political context, though, I mean, it's really a bill that for Broomfield, we did not weigh in or do anything on. So we already have the authority. Broomfield has a local licensing scheme for tobacco. So I think it's nice to have the color, but I do want to be clear that that was a bill that wasn't, right, it was something we were watching just from the CALFO, but it wasn't something that we were actively engaged on or a part of as Broomfield. It was just, that's something as a county home rule that we already had those decisions, and our council has already decided to have the local licensing scheme in place and has for years now. So.
Okay, so then the last bill area, I guess, was on the ozone bills, and I will turn that over to Julia to tell us about last week's hearing and the amazing job that Council Member Lim did.
Yes, many kudos to Jean. And then I know you had staff testify as well. So I know that was a really long hearing. So thank you for sticking in. And hopefully, Jean, I don't think you got grilled too much. I know a couple of our local government friends got a little bit in the hot seat with some more of the Republican members were sort of asking some real hard hitter questions last week. So really long hearing for the first of the Ozone Coalition bills. The one that went last week is House Bill 1330. Without spending too much time on it, in case you guys have questions about other things, this is the air quality permitting bill. So that was the first of the package. Then Senate Bill 66 and 65 will go not this week, but the following on March 20th. Good indication of, the Senate is where more of the problems are going to happen. We know the House is more left-leaning. So other than it being a long hearing, that was sort of the big thing. They had, I think over 50 support witnesses showed up. So a really robust coalition that Broomfield was a good voice of. Everything from, impacted community members, elected officials. We had scientists there, doctors, pediatricians, you name it, kind of everyone speaking it with one voice around the need for increased permitting control. So that was great, obviously robustly opposed by the oil and gas industry and the Chamber of Commerce. for, you know, potential unintended consequences to folks who are in that industry, and then in general, the permitting process for oil and gas. So not surprising, I'd say, like the players we were all kind of expecting. Just to know that it did get amended slightly to clarify that the bill applies to sources wanting to modify in a way that increases emissions. And then they narrowed the non-attainment area permitting requirements to just oil and gas sources rather than all minor sources. So folks would have to be specifically doing oil and gas on the area where they are working. Those were kind of big things. Jean, throw in any color commentary you had.
The only comment I had was that the CDPHE and ECMC were there to answer questions, and their answers to the questions kind of indicated to me perhaps their skepticism about, you know, from the about this bill. I mean, they were putting a CDPHE Director Ogletree wanted to put a much higher price tag on the fiscal note.
Yeah.
And so, and I was thinking, oh my, is this an indication of, you know, if these pass both houses, what's going to happen with the governor's office again? So that was my only other comment to add anything there that I thought, well, where's this going?
Yeah, Jean, I think you're really highlighting a concern that the coalition has moving forward in general. There have been robust conversations with a smaller group of those lead coalition members, with the governor's office, with departments. No word yet. I think that the big battle is all in the Senate. I think the assumption is that if the Senate can get on board and get to a place of being comfortable, then the governor's office is more likely to be in that same place, since we know they're kind of a little bit more centrist than the House, which is why I think the conversations on the 20th for the air quality improvements bill and the enforcement bill will be very interesting. But great.
You know, I would just add that I think the Polis administration has been, you know, channeling that they feel like there's been a lot done. They've been on a bit of a roadshow with the roadmap, the, you know, carbon roadmap, and so, and they also, on this bill in particular, there's a almost $4 million fiscal note for CDPHE to pick up, you know, the extra work that's entailed in it. So I think that this may have a tough road to hoe with respect to the administration, but as Julia said, you know, the coalition is working really hard to see if there's some middle ground, and if that can be done in the Senate, that it might be better received. And as Julia also said, the other two bills in the package, so that's Senate Bill 165 and 164, those
166.
Oh, excuse me, too many bills. 165 and 166. Those measures are on March 20th. And so I don't know if we want to repeat performance with Commissioner Lim, but that would be great. And, you know, again, just working with the coalition in tandem with them to provide support as they need. Any questions or comments on those?
Well, let me add a couple just additional notes, I think, for council in that same area. So in addition to those three bills, which again, council took those positions on February 27th, right? A couple days after we did that, two more bills were introduced kind of in that area. So there was House Bill 1338, which is a cumulative impacts and environmental justice bill, as well as House Bill 1339, which was a DIC, so a disproportionately impacted community and air pollution. So we've watched those, and I do see the Public Health Director Veiling is on the call. We're working closely with him and CalFO to kind of get their perspectives on those five bills as well with CC4CA. So a lot happening in those spaces, more to come there. So I did just want to mention those. They are on the radar. And then this doesn't really fit within, it does kind of fit in ozone and it doesn't, but I'll just mention it so you all know as well. There is two bills, and I see Deputy Attorney Gilbert is on the call too. So again, the Senate Bill 159, which is the Hawkes-Lewis bill around ECMC regulations. We think that one doesn't have I was told, have you watched the news lately and seen all the commercials? And I hadn't seen all the local commercials against that bill. But if you turn on I turned on channel 9, and you're guaranteed to see it at least once within 5 minutes of a commercial. So if you want to see, there's obviously very strong with KOGA coming out and opposed, but that one's still in a parking lot, scheduled for a few weeks out. But there is another bill that was introduced that Pat and Ryan and Allison and myself have all looked at, which is 1346, which is also looking at ECMC regulations. And Pat, I don't know if you would like to give just a brief summary, a kind of your analysis from this weekend on that bill.
Sure. I think there's what I see out there and what I've been getting through the attorney networks and the local government coalition networks. There are some amendments floating out there that don't appear yet. So, and those are significant. Boulder County's been very active in this in working with Commissioner Robbins. And so there is a direction to take out the carbon capture piece and focus on the carbon storage piece. And so that is because those are very different types of operations. It makes sense for those changes to happen to it as drafted so that it expands it to carbon storage, but doesn't address the direct carbon capture piece yet. There's also a movement to create a global definition of energy and carbon management operations so that that would include oil and gas, carbon storage, and everything that's in the future. And that will help and clarify that local control is with respect to all of those that are to be regulated by the ECMC. Is that what you need, Danae?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. So just want to let you all know we've done the deep dive. We'll continue to watch it. As Pat said, there's a lot of amendment conversations happening outside of the formal process, so more to come on that one. And then another one I wanted to mention is House Bill 1357, which is the pipeline safety bill. And Cindy, since I see you on here, I'm making a list, but I'll send it if we can get that one added. So we put that, Pat and oil and gas and myself worked on an email update to council on the CMO email on Friday. And it's very consistent with all the work we've done in the rulemaking with the PUC over the last year. And so staff had recommended a support position and we didn't hear any objections back today. So we'll work with Aponte Busam and Cindy to get our tracker updated and to note that we are in a support position. And a huge shout out to Pat and Ryan who have worked on that bill in the interim as well to make sure it got to where it was with Matt Sura. So lots of players in that. And it's nice to see that that bill was finally introduced. We had been waiting for a good time for that to happen, and we'll continue to work on that one. And then I did also want to mention House Bill 1235, which was the Reduce Aviation Impact bill. I think maybe Devin, you had emailed about it originally. That was actually in the Energy and Environment Committee hearing last Thursday. So we testified on 1313, and then the aviation bill was after. It did pass. I think it was amended to amended to appropriations. And so we'll look into that a little bit more. I think what we're trying to look at is, so essentially the bill looks at mitigation and impact from noise, pollution, and light. And so we're in this weird, and Devin, you know this best from sitting on the noise roundtable, right, of being a neighboring jurisdiction to an airport where our residents are impacted, but not being the jurisdiction that has authority or owner, and that's even loose since the federal government is also involved, right? But so the authority piece is a little messy. So we'll continue to watch that, but it was amended. I don't know if anybody listened. There were a lot of very candid residents there that were speaking about how terrible it's been living under traffic patterns in their communities. So pretty powerful testimony as well, coming off of the ozone conversation. So wanted to just also mention to everybody that we are watching that. It's not one of our top bills, but it is on our radar. And then I think the last bill that I have down that we just didn't discuss, and James, you had emailed about it, and it's House Bill 1341, which is the state vehicle idling standard bill. And I don't think Nancy's been able to jump on. She's in another meeting, but I was messaging her this morning. So just for context, right, I think you can allow a car to idle. Currently, the state standard is, I think, 5 minutes in a 60-minute window, and there are some exceptions. And so it's essentially taking away where local governments could have higher regulations in their jurisdiction around idling efforts. I think one of the challenges, as always, as Jen mentioned in her email, is enforcement, right? And staffing capacity of where are we spending our time focusing on ticketing efforts and that when there are other things going on and we have limited staffing and capacity and what that looks like. So it's always enforcement. And one thing she did mention, right? Obviously, I'm not talking about the egregious or big offenses, but just in day-to-day normal context, I think that that's one of the challenges. And what I would recommend is, and James, I know CML has also reviewed it, and I would love to hear your comments. It is scheduled for this week, I believe. Let me pull up just really quickly. I had it up.
Yeah, I think it's scheduled for this week.
14th. It's so the 14th in the Energy and Environment Committee. It is still in the first chamber, so it was just introduced on the 26th of February. It is sponsored by Representative Wilford, who has been really active. She was on the interim ozone committee and is on those big ozone bills. So if possible, I would just throw out to the group, we have time on this bill to get council's review. If Nancy's been looking from a legal enforcement side, I asked her and then she said, quick answer. And then she's like, never mind, it's a little longer than that. So I want to make sure we're not missing anything doing a quick review. So if it would be okay, I'd like to put it in the written update, but then look at a council position the following meeting. James, I don't know if that sounds okay to you. I think we have time considering still in the first committee and first chamber, but wanted to throw that out to the group.
Yeah, I think that was what I was thinking. It's
Okay.
obviously my understanding is it just allows us to have the option. So it's local control. So that's a good thing. Anytime the legislature wants to give back local control, that's a good thing. I think we should support that. But also it is on the air quality realm that it is something that if we chose to later on wanted to look at if they pass it. So that's kind of my reasoning for wanting to support it.
No, and I'm glad you flagged it because we had talked about it, I think, when it got introduced, which was like 3 weeks ago, and then which feels like 5 years ago, if I'm going to be honest, and kind of in the noise of everything else, it wasn't at the top of the tracking. So I'm glad you mentioned it. So I'll put that in the writing update because I recognize we don't have all of the council members on this call that just says, we'll be sure to bring that forward for more council discussion. And I think it will be better too with all the council members back in locally in Broomfield to have that conversation. So again, thanks for flagging it. More to come. I'll put a note in the email that goes out tomorrow. And then I think otherwise, those were all of the bills I had down in complement to what Ruth covered. But are there any other bills from your perspective we're missing or that you'd like more information on? No. Okay. So then just a reminder in closing, for tomorrow's legislative update. So we put a standing update on every agenda, right? So that we would always be able to be nimble as needed and pivot last minute on Tuesdays. So the plan tomorrow will be, there will not be a staff presentation. So I'm going to try to capture a pretty one-stop shop legislative update. And again, if something's missed, let us know. It'll be mostly a summary of what we kind of talked about today and some updates on those few questions. So the amendments for House Bill 1313, for example, and kind of a summary of what those impacts are. And then if there are questions, Jennifer obviously is available to answer them, but the goal is to recognizing that we're split between two very far different locations. There won't be a big robust update. So we didn't see any bills, at least as of now. I'm knocking on wood because it could change by tomorrow at 6 o'clock that needs immediate attention. If that's the case, we will pivot. We'll be ready to do that. But as of right now, we'll just plan on not a big legislative update at the meeting, instead of an email so everybody has it for reference. And then again, we'll be ready to take positions if needed at the following council meeting. And the one thing I would mention as well is with the upfront approval of those council rules and procedures on the bills that aren't complex or competing with different priorities. We will continue to just put them in the weekly, and if there's not objections, that gives us the ability to just move quickly. So James, we'll look at that 1341 and see if it fits in there too, but more to come. But that's kind of the plan for the next 24 hours, 48 hours, if that sounds good. And if it changes, we'll send out an email. But if you have concerns, let us know, or questions, and then we'll just go from there. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Safe travels all. Enjoy